Hello and welcome to all to this webinar, which is hosted by APA Division 52, International Psychology. This webinar is part of an ongoing series to discuss environmental justice, climate crisis, and the role of international psychology, to provide useful information for international engagement and to encourage us all to take a broad and global perspective. My name is Luca Tateo, and I am your host for today's webinar. Before we begin, our online audience have the ability to ask questions by typing them in the Q&A chat located at the bottom left of your screen. So please feel free to type your questions during the presentation. I will be making note of them, organizing them, and during the last part, 10-15 minutes or so, I will present them to Annika for discussion. So if our speaker is already there, it's perfect. I just will spend a few words to introduce her, and then I will leave her the stage. So Annika Nordlund is PhD in psychology. She is associate professor and head of Department of Psychology at Umeå University in Sweden. She's also a researcher at the Transplantation Research Unit at Umeå University, member of the Swedish Climate Policy Council, member of Umeå Transformation Research Initiative Steering Group, and she's also an expert for the Swedish government official investigation, the investigation into strengthening incentives for expanded wind power. So she's really an expert, and we are very happy to have her with us today. I will leave her the stage, and we'll be back for the discussion time afterward. Please, Annika, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction, and it's a pleasure to be invited to hold this webinar. It's Friday night here, and it's very dark outside. It's the very north of Sweden where I am. So we have very few hours of light during the day. So we are in the sleeping season here in the north of Sweden, but I will stay awake for you. I'm going to share my screen so that I can show you some slides. I hope everyone sees it now.
Yep.
Yep, good. So first off, I want to say that I will perhaps not hold a classic presentation, you know, the one where I present my latest study. I will instead attempt to make a point relating to the importance of research on behavior and climate. My point being that we as researchers, but also as teachers in psychology in general, and more specifically environmental psychology, we are important. But I will come back to that a bit later. Firstly, I'm sure most of you know, but some may find it interesting and important to go through a bit about the facts concerning climate change. It is quite discouraging to see that we, in the last 14 years, have doubled the number of planetary boundaries being crossed. Now we are in the orange or even red zones for 6 boundaries out of 9. And this is not a very good sign and not a very good sustainable development. So transformation towards sustainability is therefore needed more than ever, but this is nothing new. This was stated already in Brundtland's commission in 1987, the 3 legs of sustainability. We need to work towards social, environmental, and economic sustainability. We are not doing that well so far, many say. On the 1st of January 2016, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development officially came into force. And the goal is quite ambitious. till by the year of 2030, that's in 7 years now, we are to eliminate extreme poverty. We are to reduce inequalities and injustices in the world. We are to promote peace and justice, and we are to solve the climate crisis. It is a very ambitious goal and we're very dear for time. It is, as a side track, quite interesting right now. In Sweden, all the universities are obliged to incorporate all these 17 goals into courses and programs. So we are currently working on that. Different goals fit in different courses, of course, but it's quite interesting that this has also entered the universities. The warnings are coming, foremost from IPCC, the UN Climate Board. They said in the physical science basis that came in 2021 that we need rapid and large-scale reduction of greenhouse gas emissions if we are to limit global warming. We will, even if we stay close to 1.5 increase in Celsius or even under 2 degrees Celsius, we'll still see sea level rises and extreme weathers, and we already are seeing that around the globe. So in order to meet these goals of the Paris Agreement, which is the 1.5 increase limit in Celsius, we must reach a peak in our emission by 2025. And in a couple of weeks, that's just 1 year off. So we have work to do. What IPCC also points out in a later report is that behavioral change is crucial, but also has large potential to reduce global emissions. So we can do a lot as people. We need, obviously, changes in lifestyle, both on a systemic level across all society, but we also need it, of course, then on a more individual level. We need to look at how we consume, how we travel, what we eat, and so on. We also need to make sure that people are motivated and have the capacity to change. And we always need to make sure that social equity is there, because otherwise it will be difficult to have the motivation and capacity. So we are literally running out of gas, according to the carbon budget that we need to follow if the goals are to be reached. And the question then is, by many, and including me, are politicians around the world doing the job? Well, I think this installation that you find in Berlin captures quite well how many people feel about the political side of this, which is a lot of talk and not enough action. So transforming our society, it is definitely the challenge of our lifetime. And are we up for it? And what can psychology contribute with? Because I believe we can contribute. We know a lot about behavior change, and what factors influence behavior change. Empirical findings show that attitudinal factors, such as beliefs, values, and norms, are in play here, and that our habits often are barriers for behavioral change. In addition, we also see that personal capabilities in, for example, income, knowledge level, time that we have available, and contextual factors. Where we live, where we work, do we have access to, for example, public transportation, are of importance. These are the 4 important factors or determinants that Stern pointed out, and there has been a lot of research done in and on these different factors. There are a lot of numerous theories and models on how to understand behavioral choices that are related to environmental choices, and they have, many of them, strong empirical supports. One very well-known theory is, of course, the theory of planned behavior, recent action, which has been used on a lot of different behavioral fields, but including the environmental related behaviors. Here, the focus is on the importance of forming an intention, and that intention is based on our attitudes and norms and how a perceived behavioral control is important. This model has been cited numerous times, as you can see. That was a month ago when I checked, so it's probably even more now. We have another model that is of importance here. It's the norm activation model, focusing on altruistic behavior in general, where the personal norm is seen as important for behavioral choices, and it's activated by an awareness of consequences and an ascription of responsibility to oneself. And as a model building on the norm activation theory is the value belief norm theory. And here, it's also a focus on activating a personal norm to see a behavioral change or an intention. And this personal norm takes the form of a sense of obligation to take pro-environmental action. And action can then be different types of behaviors relating to the environment. It can be activism, it can be non-activist public sphere behavior, it can be private sphere behavior, and it can be behaviors in organizations. An activation of this personal norm is based on people's basic values and their beliefs about humankind and the ecological system and the relationship between that, the perceived negative consequences that this may have, the climate change, and perceived ability to reduce the threat. So if I feel that I have a sense of my worldview being more ecological than individualistic, and I see negative consequences that the climate and the world is getting warmer, and I see that I have an ability to do something, I have this sense of obligation to take action and may do so. A more recent theory that a lot of us is looking at is the goal framing theory. It actually is not much new, but it's a combination. It combines different fields of research, and it states that a specific goal may be activated depending on values, but also situational factors. We have the sphere of the norm activation, the value belief norm theories are found in the normative goal. That's the research there. We have a lot of research has focused on gains and losses, mostly, but not always, but mostly from a financial perspective. And we have also some research which is actually growing in content, looking at the hedonic side of life, where we people, we want to enjoy life and be excited about life. And that does play a role. Here we can see from research that the normative goal is also, again, seen to be important for pro-environmental intentions and behavioral choices. And other goals can either strengthen or weaken the force of the normative goal, which is important to consider when designing policies, for example, to change behavior from a societal perspective. If, for example, the cost is too high and the choice ahead is unpleasant to me, the normative goal loses in strength. So this is a very valuable attempt to get together all the different perspectives on trying to figure out how to change behavior, the different traditions of theoretical baselines that we have in psychology and related areas. And again, people need to reduce emissions, and that is, we need to reduce our emissions. We need individual behavior change. We know that personal capabilities, the time, the incomes, the knowledge that we have are very important. And we know that when we look at the level of knowledge, for example, it is very high among a large group of participants in the studies that I have done and many others have done. So the knowledge is there. Sometimes it is rather expensive to do the right choice. To buy an electric vehicle, for example, is something that not everyone has the funds to do. Time is of essence here. People live very busy lives and find that, for example, the car is the only choice available for me because I don't have time to wait for a bus or take the bicycle or whatever it is. And I've shown you the different theories that I look at when it comes to attitudinal factors, where we again and again see that the personal norm, the normative aspects of the environmental dilemma that we are facing is a factor to count on and build on when we try to change behavior, because we do see that people are aware of the problem, they feel responsibility for the problem, and they also feel that they should do better, should change behavior. On the other side, then, a lot of the behaviors that we do on a regular basis, they develop into habits or routines. And this is very cost efficient because we cannot go around in life, everyday life, and make decisions, informed decisions on everything. We wouldn't have time to do anything else if we were that. So habits are cost efficient, but they are sometimes also bad for the climate and the environment, where transportation and private car use is one such very strong habit that we do develop. And it's also important that we break it, because if we don't break it, we do not make conscious decisions, behavioral decisions. We just tend to do what we did yesterday and the day before that. And also, again, the contextual factors. We need to look at the context and see where do we have barriers that we can break and build away. It is, of course, not possible for someone to take public transportation if there is no public transportation. We all live in different parts of different countries where you have small cities, you have large cities, you have rural areas where you have no cities at all. And we need to take into account that that context matters, and every solution that we choose or policy that politicians develop will not hit equally for everyone. So we need individual behavioral change. And why am I trying to make a point that we are so important then? Well, we research about behavior and behavior change. I actually tried to find how many authors in the different reports that IPCC have leased have a background in psychology. It was very difficult to find anyone. So next time you see them asking for authors, join up and try to be one of them. I also see that we are really important as teachers, because we teach our students about behavior and behavior change, and they can be an extremely important resource in the future in this work to transform into a more sustainable world. So we need to prepare them and install a sense of importance in the knowledge that they bear with them outside of the campus. And we also need to engage in the societal debates. We need to engage with our knowledge and our insights into policy work for change, because what we see today is that we produce a lot of knowledge and insights, but they don't land on the politicians' table, and they don't translate into action and policies and regulations enough. We need to do more. Because who are we then? Well, our knowledge of how people think, feel, and act is important. And this is not just isolated to research and teaching in environmental psychology. I would say it's broader than that, because psychology is tampering into cognition and perception and clinical issues and group and organizations. And all that is important and usable information. So our knowledge on how people think, feel, and act is important, because we need to think, feel, and act differently in the future. And our organization knowledge on how groups and organizations work is important, because groups and organizations need to act differently. Knowledge on physical and mental health and ill health is important, because a large proportion of the young people suffer from climate anxiety. And knowledge on how we accept new, often technical or digital solutions is important, because we need to get an acceptance to use more sustainable solutions in the future. Climate anxiety is a special case in this case. In 2021, there was a article published, which actually is quite depressing to read. They made a survey with 10,000 children and youth in the age of 16 to 25 in 10 countries. And the majority, about 60%, felt very or extremely worried about climate change. Many of them said that those feelings affected negatively their daily lives. 75% said the future was frightening. And they have a lack of action. They see a lack of action from government, and they feel also betrayed by those with power. And these are the future. These are the young ones. So this is something we really need to work on, that they don't get stuck in this climate anxiety. And again, there is psychology is important. I'm actually holding time. I thought I would talk about for half an hour and then have plenty of time for discussions, hopefully, and questions. So behavioral change is a wide concept. It's about travel mode choices. We know that a large portion of the emissions come from private traveling. So if we can make people to choose a different travel mode, we win a lot. Travel behavior in general, the tendency to see the world as your stage, traveling all around the world, may have to change in the future. We may have to think about that. But also the more at home, close aspects of how do we recycle, how do we consume, consumption patterns, and how do we use the waste that is produced. The energy consumption has been extremely on topic here in Europe for the last 2 years, where energy prices have been really high, which is not a bad thing in some ways, because it might get people to actually evaluate how we use and consume energy and may decrease it. We also need to look at our diet. What do we eat? Should it be more plant-based diet? And also, we need to work together with policymakers to get acceptance for the different policies that are designed in a way that they are effective and acceptable. And with that, I would like to say thank you for listening, and I'm eager to have all the questions you have or discussions, or so I'll stop sharing, and happy holidays soon to come.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Annika. We already have some questions. And we start from a very practical question. Is people are asking about the references of your slides. So if it's possible to share them somehow.
Yeah, of course. I can send. Of course, I can send you them.
Okay.
The slides, so you can send them to those who want them.
Okay. But of course, the slides will be visible in the recording. They will be available in the recording. Sorry, I will use my power here, and before moving to the audience question, I cannot help asking you a comment on the recent COP28. So, what's your? I mean, also because you mentioned that. So, what do you think of this outcome?
I was asked by my the communication department at my university to comment on the recent COP, and I wasn't very happy with it. I find it quite disturbing that it's firstly held in an oil-producing country with one of the world's largest CO2 emissions in the world. I think they have about 20 tons per person per year. And the fact that this COP has shown that the oil industry is a very strong lobby for disturbing the sustainability process and work that most people need and want, and especially disturbing that we have island countries in the world where the question is a question of life and death. So I find it very disturbing, actually. I'm glad that they actually got an agreement signed, but the agreement is it's too weak. So.
Thank you for sharing your opinion. But I think we have time to go back to that. So I want to start from the audience question. We have a first one. Do you have ideas about how to talk about reducing meat consumption, as that seems to be an extremely sensitive topic?
Yeah.
That is an even more difficult conversation than the reduction of fossil fuels. What do you think of that?
Well, yeah, I know it is, but I think it's quite good to start with the children. We see more and more schools having 1 or 2 days a week a plant-based serving only, so no meat. And the kids are fine. sometimes the parents worry that they don't get enough energy and protein and so on. But when schools show that this is perfectly fine, they get as much as they would have if they've eaten meat. And I think children are good because children, we've known through history, when we had campaigns trying to get people to smoke less, they went through the schools, and the schools went home to parents and said, I don't want you to die, mom, so can you please stop smoking? That's powerful when your child comes and say that. And I know that in many schools, they take this very seriously. They talk a lot about recycling and how to do that. So children come home and say, oh, you can't throw that there. That's wrong. You need to recycle it. You can do the same and allow the schools to play an important role here. But also start small, 1 day a week. See if you can live without meat for 1 day a week. And that's also how to talk about it, I think. Not to say that we should ban meat. You need to realize that you need to take small steps, slow and easy.
Very interesting. I was smiling because I can hardly think about eating meat every single day. I mean, I eat meat, but thinking about someone that eats every single day meat is hard to believe in a certain sense. But I mean, of course, it's based on.
I think in Sweden it's quite common. It's not unheard of at all. It's meat and potato. Meat and potato country.
So thank you very much. We can move to the next question. Okay. Great presentation, of course. We all agree. How do we change individual behaviors when society, for instance, advertising, still bombard us with message to consume? Yeah. Advertising often equates consumption with happiness. And then there is, I hope I understand this second part. In the United States, the transition to electric vehicle is going to huge electric vehicles. So, okay, think 5,000 pounds. So they are becoming larger and bigger and bigger. Yeah. Hardly better than ICE vehicle. So I guess the question is how you can change individual behavior when the culture is pushing in another direction.
Yeah, and this is one of the largest challenges, I think. And here society as a whole have a huge responsibility because it is the case that you are encouraged to consume because that's good for the country's financial situation, the BNP, or the likes in different countries. So consumption is good for the country's economy. On the other hand, you shouldn't consume because it's bad for the environment. And it always goes back to the Brundtland's Commission, the 3 legs of sustainability, where the saying is that all 3, social, ecological, and economic, should develop sustainably all together. And I would say that's not possible. I think we need to have a different view on what our lifestyles should be and what a good life is. I think it's basically the fact that we need to reduce. We need to consume less. We need to travel less. Electric vehicles are a good way, of course, because we don't use fuels like diesel or petrol, but we still have environmental problems concerning just using cars on roads. We have cancer issues and so on. We also have a huge demand on ground because we need to have the roads there and parking ability. So it's a big thing. I think we need a shift in how we define a good life. And I think we need to have a discussion, and we need to have that in very different places, different levels in society, to get to the point where we don't start kind of bombarding people from the different points of view, where it's good on the one hand to consume, but it's bad on the other hand. We need to step up and say, this is the future we want. We want a sustainable future. We will lose some things. We may not be able to go to Thailand every winter vacation. We may not be able to consume in the manner that we do today and shop, but we have other qualities of life to look ahead for. But this is really, really difficult.
It is definitely. I want to follow up briefly David's question, because I mean usually they say that Scandinavia is, are the countries of happiness, right? So he was explicitly mentioning happiness. So how do you understand this in Scandinavia, in the Scandinavian culture? So you basically say we must be happy of different things, not of what we consume, right?
Yeah. I mean, we've translated into a consuming people or nation or world where we buy our happiness. And that's not perhaps the most natural form of happiness. I think we need to find happiness closer to heart, to our children, to experiencing things in nature, and closer to home. We need to kind of back down. And it was very interesting to be in Sweden during the pandemic, because we didn't, as many other countries, close down the country. We were allowed to be outdoors and move around. And it was very interesting to see how many people started being outdoorsy people, making fires in the woods and barbecuing sausages and trying to meet people, your friends and families, to children, outdoors. So we found different ways of getting the experiences and happiness and that we need to be happy. So there are we have a good example where we stepped back from traveling due to the pandemic. We made huge changes to our lives in a very short amount of time. And I don't think, at least from a Swedish perspective, of course, we were worried about the pandemic, but people weren't less happy because they couldn't go abroad for a summer vacation. We found other ways and realized that, well, Sweden is quite good to be on vacation in also. So I think we can actually stop and think and reflect on what would make me happy, even if I didn't live as I did today.
Thank you. Very, very profound. Let's move to next question. Okay, Dr. Joyce Frey here, international psychologist. I have several points that I found of interest in your presentation. Thank you so much for an excellent observation on this crisis. I've also studied with Al Gore in his international climate program, and my focus is on indigenous cultures. There is a propensity for psychology in general to be considered only in the Euro-Western and American models, and individualistic rather than collective cultures. What do you think our indigenous people can contribute to this dilemma?
I agree totally. We have a very Euro-Western American centered research base, unfortunately. And that is a problem because we in the West are trying to solve the problems in the developing countries from our point of view, which is, of course, not the right way to do it. I think indigenous people can contribute widely. I mean, there is in many indigenous people a different tradition and culture of viewing yourself as more of a part of the ecosystem than the ruler of the ecosystem. which is kind of the problem of the Western world. We have taken control of the resources, and this is not an ecosystem. It's not a system where we are part of it. And indigenous traditions and cultures and worldviews are much more connected to the environment as a part of it. And therefore, I think we have a lot to learn and we need to listen. But it's also a dilemma. We see it right now in Sweden, where we have the indigenous people of Samis, where they are being pushed aside because of our need to build wind parks. And they are built to some extent on their grounds where they have their reindeer herds. So there is a clash here also, a problematic one. But I definitely think that we need to do research more cross-culturally when it comes to environmental psychology. That's a lack. That's we lack that today. And we need to include the views of those who are worst off, first in line for the climate crisis, and realize that we sit in the backseat of that, and we need to honor that.
Thank you very much. We have time for a couple more questions. If one thinks of energy use as a form of claiming freedom and happiness, some say high energy usage is give a sense of paradise where things just come to us. How can people re-understand freedom and happiness with low energy consumption? That's partly you already answered. It would perhaps mean embracing willingly a greater sense of precarity and living in the presence of death. How many people can reasonably be expected to enter into this kind of mindset? And so many seem to not want to even consider living low energy lives. If I may just add a cue to this question, that was something I also noticed during your presentation, because apparently you focus on behavioral change. But I mean, all the arguments you bring are more about existential view, and then behavioral change will follow rather than the opposite. Is it correct?
Well, maybe I'm with old age is becoming more existentialist. I don't know. I think my standpoint is that my research has focused a lot on voluntary changes of behavior. And what I've come to realize that will not suffice. We will not get the change that we need if we are waiting for people to voluntarily change their behavior. So we need pressure. And then we need politics, good politics that will restrain or reward the right behavior and punish the wrong behavior. But unfortunately, we don't see those politicians. So then you kind of fall into the more existential questions. We need to look ahead and try to find kind of the transcript of the future. Where do we want to be? Do we want to be in a world where we have 2.5 higher degrees Celsius, where people are dying, we can't grow food? Or do we want something else? And what can that be? Maybe if we try to look at a better future, we start thinking about what we do here and now, because people are unwilling to change. That's in our nature. I've done this for a long time, and also we have lived at least since the Second World War. Everything has gone up, become better economy. We can shop, we can consume, we can buy new cars, we have the computers. Everything has been a positive development. And then to stop and say, oh, you can't do that now, is for many a sense of going back in time and getting it worse. And that's kind of that's where we need to kind of work, I think, to get people to understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be worse, that it's different.
I mean, sorry, questions are coming in, so we will profit or make profit of your present. So I think it's related to what you just mentioned. Is one of the big problems for environmental pollution is wars, like recent Palestine, Israel war, and Kashmir dispute, war with guns and bombs explosion. We should raise voice against who are escalating wars as well. And I will also add that, for instance, in the Baltic, I mean, we are still having the environmental consequences of Second World War. So it's 80 years ago. So what do you think about this?
Yeah, of course. I think I don't have the numbers, which is the bigger bad guy, if it's the war or it's kind of the human everyday behavior or industry in that sense. But of course, we need to, I mean, the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, they are not just about the climate crisis. They are about trying to relieve the world from wars and installing peace and justice. It's just that mankind seems to have a hard time not arguing. And arguments lead into wars too many times. And I don't really know. To some sense, you could, if you are very dark, you could say that perhaps the biggest problem on Earth is humans.
That's really tough.
Yes.
So one more, if you please. So thank you for your answer about consumption. It is interesting indeed that people were not unhappy with less, like with closer to home vacations, for example, as you explained. But after COVID-19, people started flying again, even more than before. I have the impression that the entire world is going in the other direction, towards more and more growth. After all, this is what our economic system promotes and what drives our society. It is generally considered a bad thing when the economy stops growing or even slows down. How do you think this contradiction can be handled?
I think I often have this discussion. I work mostly with colleagues from other disciplines because I think the environment question is so complex that one psychologist can't solve the problem. So you need other competences to think about this. And one of the discussions that we have, a colleague of mine in business administration, is that we simply perhaps need a different economic system to handle this. The one that we have now, where it's consumption is a good thing for a country, it doesn't work from an environmental perspective. So we meet, and as it writes here, it is interesting. People weren't unhappy before when they couldn't, or during the pandemic because they couldn't travel. They were unhappy because people they know got sick and died in worst case scenarios. And yes, colleagues and I, we also had a debate on what would happen after the pandemic. And some of my colleagues that were more positive, they said that, no, I think we've learned something here, that we will stay in-house and do our vacations. We don't need to go far away abroad. And the rest of us said, there is a huge risk that people feel that now I've been at home for 2.5 years. Now I've earned the right to travel even more. So I have to catch up. And that's unfortunately what we're seeing. We didn't stick to the new lessons that we've learned. But traveling, there's also this kind of future perspective, the narrative of the future. We can still travel. What we see here in Sweden right now is that travel traveling by train is increasing, even if it's a very long country, so it takes a lot of time using the going by train, but people are asking for it. How can we take the train out in Europe? So there is a slight shift where people don't feel as comfortable going by air anymore and feel that it would be better if we could have good railways and a lot of trains, so we could use that instead. So there are positive signs, but there are also negative signs.
Thank you very much. So we have one more comment, which is actually a very interesting final point, I will say. These issues are like a giant many-headed hydra. It is difficult to cure one problem without addressing all of them. I find the contribution of what I call predatory capitalism is part of the problem of consumption that people are questioning.
Yeah. And I would say then that that's kind of what I mean when I say that perhaps we need another economic system than what's most common in the Western world, because it clearly doesn't work from a climate perspective. And yes, it's it is a giant many-headed hydra. That's what makes it interesting to still work with, but it's also what makes it extremely difficult. And then I think you need to work with different disciplines. I work with people in chemistry right now and humanities, because the issue is so complex. So you need knowledge from all different sides of academia to be able to contribute with something.
I think that that's a very important lesson for psychology, right? May I ask you just one last question, Annika, before leaving you to turning your head to Christmas holidays. Can you give us a concrete example of how do you work? So, I mean, you discuss very important principles, very you present us the theories that you base your work on, but how you translate, just give us an example of intervention or applied work that you do with these principles.
Well, most often I've done a lot of surveys in the times that I've done research. Doing interventions is not very difficult. I've done some field experiments on trying to break people's habits in relation to private car use. Very, very difficult, but also very rewarding. I have an article published many years ago on that. So trying to change individual behavior is very difficult, because you need, as I used to say, you need to be in the kitchen of people, sitting down at the table and getting them to reflect on their choices. And no society can do that. No politician can do that. So that's why I spend a lot of time studying acceptance of different policy measures from governments, because we do need that pressure to change, because those who have changed already, trying to use the car less, trying to eat plant-based diets, and so on, they are doing it out of their own choices and own moral. But many people find that these other goals of hedonic and gain loss goals, the price is too much. They can't change. They feel they can't change. And then you need, from a society, to go in with different measures to force change, because the seriousness of the climate crisis and the time that we have, 2030, It's not far away. 2045, which is the EU goals also, it's not far away in time. So we cannot expect people to change willingly without any pressure to do so. So we have to reward the right behavior. We have to punish the wrong behavior from a societal perspective. Once you got change going, I think more will follow. And if you can get, with help of psychologists, to design good policy measures and get a recent acceptance for and a good understanding of why is this important? Why do I have to give up that? Because I have the narrative in the future. We can get people on board, but it's difficult.
I see. I mean, people don't want to let you go. So I will read a couple of things. So do you ever work with ecological economists that are pointing out the huge problems with never-ending growth based on capitalism?
I haven't specifically worked with ecological economists, but I've worked with other form of economists and people from geography and statistics and chemistry and communication and media, and also engineers I work with. I also worked with some ecologists that are focusing on the forest as a resource, with also huge demands, both as a recreation source, but also as a alternative to oil in some aspects. So no, not specifically, but it is, again, it is a huge problem with this growth-based capitalism. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we are almost at the end. I have just a couple of comments, and then I will. Joyce is writing, thank you so much for your wonderful insights and your dedication to help change our globe in a positive direction. I think it's a very nice final statement. And Marion is suggesting donuts economists. I think that's the name, donuts economist. Kate Rowart is an economist. She some reference. Okay, so thank you very much, Annika. It was super interesting, and I mean, I just have to thank you once again for your time and your insightful talk, and I thank all of you for participating so actively. I regret that we don't have a verbal interaction, but it's just because of a technical requirement we have. But just to close, we would love to hear from you in the audience about this webinar. So please provide feedback on your experience about both the content and the format of today's discussion. And I just have to, on behalf of Division 52 Webinar Committee and the International Environmental Justice Committee, thank Annika once again, and please enjoy the weekend and enjoy the rest of the day, and Merry Christmas to you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Merry Christmas to all of you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.